Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Baldrige Foundation's Institute for Performance Excellence webinar, Leadership Excellence and Operational Systems, LEOS. As a reminder, due to the high number of participants, everyone will be kept on mute during the presentations. If you have questions, please submit them to the moderator in the Q&A box located on your control screen. Presenters will answer questions during our panel discussion. Before we get started today, I want to take a moment and recognize members of the Mac Baldrige Society who serve as trustees of the Foundation's Institute for Performance Excellence. It is their generous support that makes presentations like today's possible. Today, we are joined by Pamela Tripp, Regina Maney, and Christopher Van of Corporate Transcendence. We're very excited about their presentation today. And I would just, before we get started, I'd like to turn it over to Pamela.
Thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate that. We are excited about being here today. So, good afternoon. It's truly an honor for us to be here. The room is filled, I know, with leaders that know the Baldrige framework. Also, the set of questions that go with it. There's also people here, I believe, that's probably achieved the Baldrige Award, and there's probably those that are on their journey to Baldrige. So we are very excited to be here today and talk to you about LEOS, the Leadership Excellence Operational System, a practical way to live the Baldrige framework. Baldrige matters. I don't think we need to debate that in any way right off the bat. What we hope to offer you today is something that will help you live Baldrige in a clearer, simpler reality that will be easy to refer back to Baldrige and to understand the connections between our LEOS, or the Leadership Excellence Operational System, and the Baldrige categories. Baldrige is elegant, isn't it? On paper, it is astounding. But in real life, running organizations and leading organizations can be a little chaotic and messy. So we know the struggle. We know the struggle between one department focusing on workforce engagement, another maybe focusing on customers, another on finance, and somewhere in between, you're thinking about strategy. But that is at the very end of the thought process. And then what we find is that what results in our organization is silos. But with those silos and that fragmentation, we do have an opportunity to have systems. So that is why LEOS was invented and developed. It was created to resolve the chaos, to simplify our daily functions of leadership excellence through culture, quality, and finance and governance. So let's move on into what LEOS is made up of. It is not a replacement for Baldrige, and we don't need a new framework with the one we already trust. Instead, LEOS is a simplifier. It takes the richness of Baldrige and organizes it into 4 domains that leaders can easily remember, communicate, and operationalize each and every day. The 4 domains are the culture domain, which is going to focus on people, customers, partners, communities. Quality domain, that's going to focus on systems and workflow processes and how important they are. Finance domain is going to focus on resources and equipping and having enough resources to do what we need to do within and outside our organization. And the governance domain is going to be looking at the accountability of your entire organization. So today we're going to walk through each one of these domains. We'll show you directly how they align with the 8 categories of the 220 or 2025. It's not 200 categories, but the 2025 Baldrige criteria. And we'll give you some real world examples of how they work in healthcare, in business, education, and in the nonprofit world as well. So by the end, I hope you'll see that LEOS is something not new, to compete with Baldrige. It is a bridge. It is a pathway. It is a roadway. And we want to take Baldrige off the shelf and be able to put it in daily practices so every leader and every employee at every level of your organization knows what to focus on in their energy and time and efforts.
So here you see the heart of LEOS. 4 domains that capture the full complexity of organizational life in a way that is simple, but it's not simplistic. The culture domain says people matter most. Without engaged colleagues, without satisfied customers, and trusted community partners, excellence simply cannot take root. The quality domain says systems matter. Processes, safety, and learning are the backbone of reliability. The finance domain says that resources matter. Dollars, data, and decisions must align with the mission and strategy of an organization if we want to not just sustain the operations, but thrive. And finally, the governance domain says accountability matters. Oversight, compliance, and integrity keep our organizations on course. Now, here's the key. These 4 domains are not silos. They overlap, they reinforce, and they depend on one another. And they align directly with the 8 categories in the 2025 Baldrige criteria. Culture aligns with workforce, with customer and markets, and community relationships. Quality aligns with operations, with organizational learning, and customer and markets. Finance aligns with finance and strategy, and it influences results across every category. And governance aligns with leadership and governance, with strategy, and with community relationships. So think of LEOS as a translation layer. Baldrige is very rich. It is very comprehensive. LEOS makes it simple and teachable. And we want to emphasize throughout the training today, LEOS is not a replacement. It is a simplifier. We want to give you a picture, an image, if you will, for how these domains work together. So each of the 4 LEOS domains, culture, quality, finance, and governance, think of each one of them as a tree. Baldrige, of course, is about work processes, KPIs, results, and accountability. So in this tree, in our LEOS domains, all 4 of them, the roots of the tree represent work processes. They're not glamorous, oftentimes they're hidden, but they determine everything that grows above ground. The trunk of your tree is your key performance indicators. The trunk is what gives strength and stability, carrying the nutrients upward. Key performance indicators carry the truth about an organization's performance. The branches and the leaves, they're your accountability systems, and they spread wide across the organization, capturing light, turning energy into growth and development for the organization. Because without accountability, you cannot spread improvement throughout the organization. And finally, the fruit of your tree, those are your results. When those processes are strong, when they're working incredibly well, when we're working to improve those processes on an ongoing basis, when our KPIs are clear and our accountability systems are functioning, the organization will bear fruit, not occasionally, not by accident, but predictably. Baldrige emphasizes systems thinking. LEOS operationalizes it. So processes, KPIs, accountability, and results, they're woven through all 4 of those domains.
So why LEOS? Leadership Excellence Operational System. It did not come out of a textbook or a whiteboard exercise. It grew out of hard-earned experience, more than 30 years actually within the healthcare system. And the frustration of watching organizations pulled in multiple directions at once. Every department having its own agendas, priorities, pillars, and leading a certain way. to their style. The results was misalignment, fragmentation, and leaders found ourselves spinning our wheels. Teams were in silos, and the mission got lost in all the noise. The realization was simple, but very profound. Just as we have processes for patient care, safety, finance, or education, we need a process of organizational leadership itself. We need a model. We need a model that can align at every level of the organization, focusing on the same priorities at the same time, moving in the same direction. LEOS was built to answer those needs. Not a framework, but a simplifier, a pathway, a road to achieve Baldrige, an operating system that organizes the work of leadership into 4 domains, clear enough to be taught at every level of the organization, strong enough to be carried through the complexities of real-time organizations. And that is why LEOS exists. Before we go deeper into the 4 domains, we need to pause and think about the weight of each domain. This is called the 3-3-3-1 principle. LEOS organizes leadership so they're equal, but most of those are equal in weight, but as you see, governance is much less. Why this distribution? Because culture, quality, and finance are the 3 drivers that hold up systems. They hold up organizations. They are where leaders spend the majority of their energy and efforts. And that is where our outcomes are made or we lose them. Governance, while accountability is extremely important through many accountable organizations that may survey your organization, governance carries 10%, and that is because it's not less important, but it's because if we get the first 3 domains accurately and build them strong, governance will take care of itself. It follows naturally. And that is a paradigm shift in many organizations. But with the first 3 being viable, reliable, and strong, governance will meet the accountability needed to make a strong organization. Therefore, your boards will be strong. If you have board of directors, your auditors will trust you. Your regulators will see the strengths within your organization. And in other words, culture, quality, and finance create the conditions for governance to succeed for that accountability. So remember, it's the 3-3-3-1 principle. It's simple, memorable, and it reminds us of where to focus our time, our energy, and our effort.
So let's take a few moments to dive into the domains themselves, and we'll start with culture as our first domain, people. And in the LEOS, culture carries 30% weight, time and resources. And why so much for culture? Because quite frankly, without people, nothing else works. And to quote the renowned strategist Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture aligns directly with 3 Baldrige categories. They align with workforce because employee engagement drives every outcome of the organization. It aligns with the Baldrige category of customer and markets because culture shapes how customers are treated. And it aligns with community relationships because culture determines how we show up in the places that we serve. In the community health field in which we work, we often say employer of choice, provider of choice, and partner of choice. The culture answers the question, what is it like to work here? What is it like to be served here? And what is it like to partner with us? So let's break it down. In healthcare, culture shows up in workforce engagement. A hospital with high turnover and burnout will never reach clinical excellence, no matter how good its quality systems are. A hospital with strong engagement, however, will see higher safety, will see better patient outcomes, and it will even see better financial results. And in business, culture drives customer loyalty. Companies like Southwest Airlines, they did not build their reputation on price alone. They built it on a customer of service, a culture of service. In education, culture shows up in teacher morale. Students succeed when teachers feel supported, when they feel valued, and they feel empowered to innovate. And in nonprofits, culture determines volunteer passion. A nonprofit that treats volunteers as partners is going to multiply its impact. One that treats them as expendable, that organization is going to shrink. And in government, culture is often the difference between public trust and public frustration. Citizens do not experience government as policy, but rather citizens experience it as an interaction with their employees. And so, as we mentioned earlier, the tree, if you visualize the tree, the trunk being key performance indicators, what are some examples of key performance indicators that relate to culture by a few different sectors that are represented, I know, in this webinar today? In healthcare, some KPIs could be employee engagement survey scores or annual turnover rate, staff retention, also patient satisfaction scores like those in healthcare know HCAHPS, or percentage of staff completing recognition or appreciation programs. In business, some culture KPIs might be employee net promoter score or customer net promoter score, voluntary turnover or percentage of workforce participating in professional development, or maybe customer repeat purchase rates. In education, some culture KPIs might be teacher retention or student satisfaction engagement surveys, faculty participation in professional learning, professional development. It could also include patient and community satisfaction ratings or students' attendance rates. In nonprofit organizations, it could be volunteer retention. The KPIs could be volunteer engagement hours or donor satisfaction surveys, percentage of volunteers moving into leadership roles, or a community trust index. And in government, culture KPIs could be employee morale. They could be survey results from those employee morale surveys, average citizen satisfaction ratings, complaint to resolution ratio, number of frontline recognition initiatives, or community engagement participation rates. Now, what does culture do? It creates belonging in an organization. It creates a sense of purpose. It creates a sense of alignment with the mission, vision, and values and strategy. And when employees feel seen and they feel heard, they bring their best selves to work. And when they don't, they disengage. And worse yet, they may become actively disengaged. We once worked with an organization that had well over 40%, even higher turnover. The leaders of the organization blamed the pay, but when the organization began to conduct listening sessions with their staff, they discovered that the number one issue was not, in fact, pay at all. It was simply recognition. People did not feel valued in the organization. They did not have a sense of dignity. And as a result, the organization was very intentional in launching a peer recognition program, reward and recognition. They trained their leaders and their frontline staff how to express appreciation. And within a year, turnover dropped significantly. Same pay, same benefits, different culture. So, colleagues, I would ask you, think about the time that you felt deeply valued at work. How did it change your energy? Now imagine if that was the norm across your entire organization. Culture is also about customer experience, not just colleague, but also customer experience. And Baldrige reminds us, engaged employees create engaged customers. If frontline staff are disengaged, your customers are going to feel it instantly. And finally, culture shapes community trust. Organizations with strong cultures, they partner with their communities in very authentic and meaningful ways. And those with weak culture, those organizations with weak culture, they withdraw or they only show up when it benefits them. So let's pause just a moment before we move to the next LIOS domain. Culture is not fluff, it's not optional, and it is, in fact, the hard edge of performance. When culture is ignored, organizations fracture. And when culture is tended, organizations flourish. And that's why in LIOS, we have prioritized culture with 30%. It forces us to treat people, customers, and community as core measures of success, not as afterthoughts. And here's the truth. Culture is not just another thing that leaders manage. It is the thing that determines how everything else performs. That is the power of the culture domain, 30% of our time and resources in the LIOS.
Thank you, Chris. The second domain is quality. In LIOS, quality also carries 30% weight, as we talked about. It aligns with the three Baldrige categories of operations, which is reliability of your processes, organizational learning, the discipline of improvement, customer and markets, which is because customers measure you by your quality first. Quality asked, are our processes reliable, safe, and improving? In manufacturing, quality could mean defect prevention. The Toyota production system became famous because it embedded quality into every step of the production line. Workers could stop if they saw a defect and report it. And this was putting prevention above inspection and improved the quality of the product. In healthcare, quality means safety. Hospitals that reduce like central line infections or working to prevent falls. These are not projects. These are embedding quality into their systems. In education, quality means curriculum reliability. If one student has an excellent experience and another student has a poor one, quality has failed. In nonprofits, quality means program design. Are services delivered consistently? Are outcomes measured, learned from, and improved? Now, here are some examples of the KPIs within those sectors. Some examples. So healthcare, hospital-acquired infections rates. That may be a very strong KPI that could be measured. Readmission rates, medication error rates, patient safety incident reports, clinical outcome measures, as in A1Cs for controlling diabetes. In the business sector, defect rates per certain volume or quantity, on-time delivery, customer complaints, process cycle time, first pass yield. Education, you could be looking at standardized test results, curriculum alignment, student learning outcomes, achievement results, grading consistently in audits, and then accreditation compliance findings. Nonprofits, it could be program completion rates, service delivery, consistency, outcome success rates. All of these would be going toward continuous improvement within the nonprofit. The government, service delivery accuracy, error-free license being issued, average response times, compliance audit results, citizen complaints, process improvement, or implementation rates. There was once a hospital we worked with, and they decided they were going to try to reduce their harm rates, their missed rates in the hospital. So they, across the entire hospital, 10 minutes at the top of every shift was dedicated to discussing how to have a safer environment and how to prevent something from happening to do harm. So interesting enough, after this was done for a while, they started noting how many actions were taken that prevented a risk or prevented harm. And just by involving everyone across the hospital, this dropped tremendously. When was the last time your organization celebrated a process improvement with the same energy as we do a financial win? Baldrige teaches us that processes create results. LEOS reinforces that by giving quality its own domain. But here's the caution. Improvement cannot just live in the quality department or domain. Quality is in every department within your organization. Improvement must be that disciplined across every department, every area, and function. So in LEOS, the quality domain ensures improvement, safety, and learning aren't projects. They're the culture. They're our daily focus.
So the third domain is finance. And while finance may not be the most glamorous, it still gets 30% of the weight in our LEOS. And I like to think of finance as guardrails on the highway. You never notice them when you're driving straight, but boy, you're glad when you swerve. And that's finance. And it connects with two Baldrige categories. Of course, with finance, it's about sustainability and stewardship. And then the other category of strategy, which is alignment of our dollars to our mission. And finance asks the critical question, how do we use our resources? How do we use our money and our data to sustain the mission of our organization? So in healthcare, finance means dashboards that connect dollars with outcomes. A clinic shouldn't just report profit or loss. It should show whether dollars are producing healthier communities. In business, finance means investments aligned to strategy. Amazon, for example, invested billions in logistics, not randomly, but to serve its strategy of speed and reliability. And in nonprofits, finance means donor trust. Donors don't just want to know how much you raised, they want to know if their dollar actually advanced the mission of the organization. And in education, finance means resource allocation. Do the budgets match the mission of student success, or do they reflect politics and silos? And some examples of key performance indicators for finance in sectors. In healthcare, it could be operating margin, days cash on hand, cost per patient encounter, payer mix balances, or percentage of budget allocated to community health initiatives. In business, it could be gross profit margin or return on investment or revenue growth rate, cost to revenue ratio, or capital investment as a percentage of revenue. In education, financial key performance indicators might include per pupil spending or percentage of budget that is spent directly on instruction or resource allocation equity metrics. It could also include grant donating or donor funding utilization or cost per graduate. In nonprofits, we might look at, as a KPI for finance, program expense ratio, a percentage of budget spent on mission versus administration and fundraising. We may look at donor retention rate or fundraising return on investment. Certainly in nonprofits, cash reserve levels. And for those who are, many of those who are grant funded, we look at grant utilization rates. In government, we might look at budget variance or cost per services delivered or taxpayer dollar efficiency indexes, or unspent funds that were returned, or a percentage of budget allocated to priority programs. A quick reflection question in thinking about the LEOS and thinking about finance and thinking about how it ties to strategy and resource allocation. If we were to give your organization $10 million tomorrow, would you know exactly how to invest it in ways that advance your mission and your strategy? That's what finance in LEOS looks to do. Now, finance isn't only about money, but it's also about data stewardship. How do you choose your KPIs? Do they tell the truth, or do they just make us look good? Do they drive action, or do they create noise? A nonprofit we are familiar with had over 60 key performance indicators on its management dashboard, and no one could remember them. Staff were drowning in numbers, but they were starving for meaning and for understanding. And so the leadership decided to restructure around 12 key indicators balanced across the LEOS domains of culture, quality, finance, and governance. And suddenly leaders had clarity. Data became usable again. And more importantly, it was understandable not just at the leadership level, but also in management and at our front lines. So Baldrige reminds us that strategy and finance must be aligned, but LEOS makes that daily reality by embedding finance as one of the 4 key domains. Because when resources, they align with our mission, growth is sustainable organizations and they thrive. But when resources don't align with mission, we know mission drift will inevitably follow.
So the fourth and final domain is governance. In LEOS, governance carries 10% of the weight, as we said. It's not because it is unimportant. It's because if you master culture, quality, and finance domains, governance will take care of itself. Governance aligns with 3 Baldrige categories: leadership and governance, which is talking about board oversight and integrity; strategy, accountability for direction; community relationships; transparency, and trust. Governance asks, are we meeting our obligations with integrity? It covers compliance with program requirements such as OSHA, HIPAA, accreditations, audits, anything from the local fire department to Joint Commission for Healthcare. It's the key point. If culture is broken, quality is weak, and finance is misaligned, governance becomes a nightmare. Audits fail, accreditation stings, and boards are restless. But when the other 3 are very strong and viable, governance thrives. Compliance becomes predictable. Boards gain much confidence. Regulators trust you and your organization, and you are off to an excellent operating system. How many know of nonprofit boards that spend a lot of their times buried in talking about regulatory or compliance? If you're in those meetings, you can tell that the mood is very defensive. But as organizations strengthen their culture, quality, and finance, reports become clean, predictable, and understandable. The board shifts to strategy, asking what's next instead of what's going wrong. Does your board look forward or backwards? Governance is crucial. Ethical leadership, transparency, accountability, these never go away. But governance flourishes when culture, quality, and finance do their work well. That's why LEOS assigns 10% weight, not because it's small, but because it is the outcome of getting the first 3 domains correct.
One of the greatest strengths of both the Baldrige criteria and the LEOS model is adaptability across sectors. And I want to take a moment to value all of the variety of sectors that are represented on this webinar. We've used education, healthcare, nonprofit, business, and government as examples, but I know that there are many other businesses and other sectors that are represented, and we want to acknowledge that we see you today and thank you for your participation. So Baldrige and LEOS is adaptable across sectors, and because the truth is excellence doesn't belong to one industry, it belongs to a way of thinking. And LEOS gives leaders in any sector a common language. So let's walk through just a few examples here. In education, culture shows up in faculty engagement. Teachers who feel supported and valued, they pass that energy to their students. Quality is in curriculum design. Is it consistent? Is it reliable? Is it measurable? And finance, it's resource allocation. Does the funding align with student success, or is it trapped in outdated silos? And then governance in education, it's board oversight. Are school boards focused on compliance only, or are they also advancing strategic vision and accountability for the future? In nonprofits, culture is volunteer alignment. When volunteers feel connected to the mission, they give more time, energy, and advocacy. The same could be said of those staff that are in those nonprofit organizations as well. In quality, it's program design. Do the services deliver reliable outcomes? In finance, it's stewardship. Are donor dollars being used transparently, and are they being used effectively? And governance is mission accountability. Is the nonprofit truly delivering on its promises to the community? In business, culture is workforce engagement and customer connection. We've all seen companies where employees thrive and the ripple effect is on loyal customers. Quality is the products and the processes, reliability, safety, continuous improvement. In business, for finance, it's sustainability, the ability to grow profitably while reinvesting in innovation. And in governance, in business, that's shareholder trust, ethical practices, transparency, and long-term accountability. In government, we look at culture as some examples might be employee morale because the citizens feel it in every interaction. Quality is service delivery, from issuing a driver's license to responding to emergencies in the community or in the state. Finance is taxpayer stewardship. Are we using public dollars wisely? And governance is compliance, ensuring laws, regulations, and that the public trust is upheld. So, no matter the sector that's represented here today, be it education, nonprofits, business, government, the building blocks are the same. Culture, which is people, quality, which is systems, finance, which is resources, and governance, which is accountability. That's the power of LEOS. It gives us a structure that is universal, but it's not uniform. It respects the differences of each sector. In fact, it respects the differences of every organization, while still giving us, across all sectors, one shared language of excellence. So which of these examples in education, nonprofit, business, or government, or another sector, what resonated most with you? And how might you explain LEOS in those terms to your own team in your own organization?
Okay, another very important part of the LEOS model is that of the 4 domains, culture must come first. We give 30% to culture, quality, and finance, and 10% to governance, but culture takes priority. While the percentages are balanced to some degree, the order does matter. The first domain is culture for a reason, because everything rises and falls on the engagement of your workforce and the culture that supports it. So think about it. Without engaged people, the best quality systems will collapse. Without engaged people, the best financial plans will fall apart. Without engaged people, governance will be reduced to a compliance theater and checkbox. So yes, each domain matters, but culture must come first. When culture is healthy, quality improves, finances align, and governance thrives. Now, here's the takeaway I want you to remember. LEOS is not a replacement for Baldrige. It is a bridge. It is a simplifier. The way LEOS makes a way to make Baldrige teachable, livable, and actionable at every level of leadership and every level of the organization. Baldrige gives us a gold standard of questions. LEOS gives us the operating system that makes those questions actionable. 4 domains, 8 categories, 1 operating system of excellence. And it all starts with culture. As you think about your own organization, let us ask you this. If an outsider spent just $1 few days or a week in your organization, how would they describe the culture? What is it like? Would they describe energy and trust, or would it see fatigue and disengagement? And what's one step you might could take this month to shift the culture toward higher engagement? We once asked a CEO, what's the number one thing you worry about? And he said, finances. No surprise. But when we asked the frontline staff the same question, they said, nobody listens to us. That disconnect is why culture must come first. If you listen to your people, your employees, your finance and governance will almost always follow in excellence. If you don't, no financial plan will save you or deliver what you are desiring. Here's a challenge. What would you change if your leadership, or what would change if your leadership team spent as much time on culture as they do on the financial dashboards? What would change if culture was not just a side conversation, but the first agenda item in every strategic discussion or meeting? LEOS works optimally if you start in the right place, not with compliance and not with finances, but with people. So as you take this framework back to your organization and reflect, remember, culture is not everything, but everything depends on culture. As we wrap up today, remember 4 domains, 8 categories, 1 leadership excellence operational system, but it all starts with culture. Let's pull the threads together. We began by acknowledging the challenge. Baldrige is brilliant, but organizations are messy. Leaders often ask, where do we put our focus? There are so many competing priorities. LEOS answers that by simplifying the work into 4 domains: culture, quality, finance, and governance. We have explored how each aligns with the Baldrige categories. We saw how each plays out in healthcare, education, nonprofits, business, and government. We named the truth that governance, while very essential, flourishes best when culture, quality, and finance are strong. And we keep coming back to the central fact that culture comes first. So what's the next step? Whatever it is, LEOS gives you the structure. Baldrige gives you the questions, and your leadership team will provide the answers and give it life. So we leave you with this challenge today. What's one action in the next 30 days you could do to strengthen one of the LEOS domains in your organization? Framework does not change organizations, people do. And we hope with LEOS, giving it a try, you'll see that it will start with you. And with that, I think we can conclude our presentation today, and we will turn it back over to Josh. I do want to recognize Chris Van. I really didn't or mention you in the beginning, Chris. Chris and Dr. Regina Gainey. Dr. Regina Gainey is our Senior Executive of Education. And you have to remember, under every domain that we have, there are the culture excellence operating systems. There is the quality or QoS excellence operating systems. Finance, FIOS, finance excellence operating systems, and governance is GEOS, governance excellence operating system. And Dr. Gainey spends a lot of time in the CEOS, culture excellence operating system, with an entire educational curriculum and blueprint under there. So I did want to recognize my colleagues that I value so very much. And I do want to thank each and every person that's been on this webinar today. And I hope you have found it interesting and gained a lot out of it. it not only is something, LEOS is not only something that you can attach to Baldrige, but if you're in other, and you are in different businesses, you have your own accrediting surveying agencies that come in, it will also be applicable to each one of those. So I'll turn it back over to you, Josh. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys. That was a great presentation. We really appreciate it. And we definitely have some very interesting questions in the chat. And so I would like some of them come in publicly and privately. So I'd like to go and answer or ask you some of those if you would be available here. One of those, well, first of all, I'll get ahead of the one. I think it's clear that you established that LEOS is not a replacement for Baldrige, but it complements it, right? And so I liked how you put it, that it takes the series of questions that are offered through the Baldrige framework to kind of an actionable approach there through LEOS. And so I like that. What are But as you do that, what are some of the biggest barriers when implementing LEOS, and how did you overcome them? How do you expect people will overcome them in their respective industries? Even to kind of piggyback on that question, one that I saw come into the chat was specifically on the leadership side and related back to that important word that you already mentioned, Pamela, culture, right? And how that
Absolutely.
all connects. So if you wouldn't mind speaking to that on a high level, that would be fantastic.
I'll be glad to. So anytime there is a new leadership model introduced, the first thing is like leadership or new model fatigue. Okay, is this model, how many pillars are there going to be? How, how transformational is it going to be for the organization? Is the squeeze worth the juice, right? And so what we have learned is that just change fatigue can set in among leaders and employees. But people want simplified systems today. We are a simplified society. We want to break down complex problems into something that we can get our head around, our arms around, and actually make tangible results out of. So to overcome those barriers or the complexity is in the simplicity of it. And if by doing an exercise, you go back and you take an agenda, for example, you take an agenda in your organization that you would typically use in a department meeting, maybe in a senior leadership meeting, and you take the items on that agenda and you put them under each domain that they belong under, either people agendas, quality agendas, or finance agendas, or governance agendas. And by doing that, what you'll find is that even though you're in the room with multiple departments, there is a commonality and threads that run among all of it. And it's important for everyone in that room to have a better understanding of the resources, as in finance, where we are in customer satisfaction in all departments versus just one. But it is a way to pull all those threads together to make it simpler, to make it easier to digest. And so I remember a time I think I had 12 pillars as a vice president in a hospital, and I could not even remember them. I'd have to look at the paper. This has taken everything, multiple pillars or multiple responsibilities within different areas across a very complex organization, and condensing them down to 4 areas. And once you understand those domains, you'll find out, oh my gosh, this is so much clearer, it's simpler, and it drives us where we want to go as an organization. It brings that commonality and that transparency across the organization. It highly involves everyone. So everyone in the organization should understand that we operate out of 4 domains. This is how we operate. This is our leadership and how we operate: culture, quality, finance, and governance, and what that means. I hope I helped answer that. But I really think it's in the transparency of it and the simplicity of taking something complex and reducing it to something that's conceptualized.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question. I think you nailed that. So on this one, how do you keep LEOS dynamic and relevant as the healthcare environment changes? Now, I'm sure also, your answer might be able to even apply or be applicable across industries, but just focusing on healthcare and why it's so critical for it to be dynamic and relevant because you had mentioned already that kind of new system fatigue concept, right? And so I'm just interested in your answer to that.
I think I can give, there's a lot of challenges in healthcare in many industries, and they could be internal or external, but we wear out this topic, COVID, but during COVID, that was a severe external stressor on organizations. So in an organization that is really concentrating on cultural quality, finance, and governance, and everybody understands it and lives that out every day, remembering culture comes first. And I just have to give a plug for healthcare individuals. They're the most selfless people on the planet, in my opinion. But having said that, when you have a strong culture means you have bought into the mission, you have bought into the vision and the values of that organization, and you understand as an individual in any department what that means as a whole. That when something as strong as external pressures of COVID comes, you realize that your organization has the flexibility and the reliability and the resiliency through these domains because they are achieving excellence in all four of them to be able to weather that storm. It could be cutbacks financially, but it is true when you achieve that high level of reliability, transparency in culture will win the day many times for you. Your people will win the day. If you're having financial problems and issues, or you get cutbacks, by having a strong culture, your employees will make that happen for you. It won't be dictated, as we must do that or that. They naturally are bought into the system, to the culture, and will deliver. So, and like I said, there are complete under each category, and we don't have time today, but there are actually things to deliver. So, we have the system, but actually under each COS, whether COS, QOS, or FIOS, or GOS, we have different systems that fit under that directly relate back to the Baldrige criteria, and as well as to many other criteria. But in a quick answer again, in healthcare, you probably undergo joint commission. And so joint commission with thousands of standards are going to fit under those four categories. And by operating that, you don't have to worry about missing one of those standards. They will be in there.
Yep, that makes sense. That's a good call. So next question here, can you give an example of an organization using LEOS successfully? What's worked for them? How have you seen the transformation? Because this ties also into a couple of questions I've seen in the chat here where people are interested in the result of implementing LEOS and how that pairs well nicely with Baldrige, so to speak.
I can give you an example. It's pretty a dire example, and really where it was conceptualized. LEOS was conceptualized and worked on for many years, but this would be the proof in the case study. In an organization that was essentially bankrupt, never filed, but really could have. They had lost everything. They were, as the Joint Commission surveyor said, you are burnt to the ground. This organization is burnt to the ground. So how do you come out of that, right? How do you rise above the ashes? And that is where LEOS was put into play. And we saw by doing LEOS, we had a simplistic model that not only was the leadership mindset, but it was the operational mindset that we are going to achieve, and we're going to have KPIs, and we're going to measure things in these four areas. And they're going to be ugly. Those outcomes are going to be ugly to begin with because of the state of the organization. But where do we start? And then how do we rise to it? And very important there is in this organization, and it really brings home how culture must come first. This was an organization that literally deferred salaries and lost a sizable due to layoffs or people just essentially quitting because of the financial situation. But in a short number of years, the organization came back strong. It doubled in size. Its budget doubled. It never filed bankruptcy, and it paid back every red cent it ever owed anybody. So, and has won national awards and has exceeded all expectations as an employer, a provider of choice. It is a healthcare organization and has done perfection on Joint Commission, on other surveys coming in, and that is being burnt to the ground and 15 years later. So that is pretty remarkable in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let me ask you this. So, because of the relationship between Leos and Baldrige, there might be people who are doing Baldrige already. Why would you say to them, hey, you should do Leos or utilize Leos as well? And then on top of that, how would they get started? What does that look like exactly? And is it an all in, dip your toe in, or is it all in, or is it dip your toe in type of approach? Speak a little bit to that.
Well, I believe in a process. So if you're in a certain paradigm of leadership, I believe anytime that you do a transformation to another paradigm of leadership, there should be very sensitive and steps to take, right? I don't believe in just throw the baby out with the bathwash. I believe in customization to some degree and to make it a smooth transition and being sensitive to the feelings of leaders and others and getting that buy-in is so important. So let's see. What was that other question, Josh? You were asking me about that.
It was, the connection between Leos and Baldrige and why they should
Okay.
do
Right.
Leos, and then also how do they get started?
Okay.
Is
All
that,
right.
and
So I'm
let me just
sorry.
jump.
I'm sorry.
I just
So my mind just runs away when I'm thinking about it. So
yeah.
and in Leos and Baldrige, one thing I want to say there is that if you're on the Baldrige journey, and I know when we first looked at the Baldrige journey, and in my career, let's say 30 years ago, it was a long time. Everybody said, oh, it's 10 to 15 years before you'll get there. It could be 20. But I will say with Leos, it will improve and speed up the time to get with Baldrige because it aligns so much with its categories. If you want successful surveys of any kind, like I said, whether the fire department's coming or the sanitation people are visiting your organization, whatever it could be, based on your sector, Leos will align your organization across all departments with all the employees and all the leaders to get you where you need to go quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And so that to me is just worth everything, right? We all want to achieve excellence as quick as possible and to maintain excellence and to make our excellence tomorrow always greater than our excellence today. In order to do that, we must have a system in a learning environment that is constantly improving because we never arrive, right? So, and if you're going to put it inside your organization, I would say you would need to get, we would be happy to talk with you and to help you deliver on that and educate others on how LEOS works. We're hoping to have a book out on LEOS. I'll just throw that out there, a thin book of LEOS. But I hope that we could have an opportunity to show your organization, and you could just contact myself or Chris or Regina. But if we had an opportunity to show you how LEOS would fit your organization, how it would translate smoothly over, I'm sure with whatever pillars you use or how you lead, I think you'll find that it's a very simple transfer.
Well, Pamela, Regina, Chris, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. It's been fantastic to hear about Leos and the way it connects with Baldrige. We're always in favor of new tools, structures, framework, etc., that can help the Baldrige journey, as people like to say, for organizations, right? We want to be able to be a supporter for them in any way we can. And if this is a tool or resource that can help them along their journeys, we would encourage them to take advantage of it. And thank you all for your time today. Foundations Institute for Performance Excellence has more than 400 training and professional development certification opportunities offered online and at your own pace. This month, we are showcasing one certification course relating to today's presentation, the Mastering Foresight and Scenario-Based Planning Certification Program. You can visit the Institute website at baldrigeinstitute.org/education to learn more and to register. As a reminder, the recorded version of today's presentation and slides will be emailed to all who registered next week. And once again, thanks to all of our great sponsors and donors. We hope to see you all again at next month's webinar on September 25th, where our guest will be Cindy Mulroney from Fries and Nichols. Thanks again for attending this afternoon's webinar, and have a great day, everyone.